Hello, wonderful good morning. Here to panel 2 of our first ever virtual Midwest SME Forum. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, we'll wait for another minute or two to allow people to join us from the recently ended fireside chat. All right, I think this looks pretty good. Welcome to everyone else who just joined in. This is panel 2 of our virtual Midwest SME Forum today. It's my pleasure to be the moderator of this panel, and let's get started and dive right in. Quick introduction from my end for this panel today, a couple of household items that you might be familiar with. You will be muted during the presentation, but there will be plenty of opportunity at the end to ask questions on the box on the right of your screen. So please feel free to type those in, and we'll hope we can address those towards the end at the question answer session. You can also raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can ask that question that way. Either way works, should work well. Please also introduce yourself briefly and what company you're with today. Yes, you joined today Cybersecurity Challenges for the Remote Workforce, our panel 2 of the Virtual Midwest SME Forum. The first for us as well and our network to do this virtually. So I think it's a very fitting topic for the challenges of today. We were just chatting right before we started. Most of us probably have worked remotely since the end of March with little to no work from the office. So with our panel here today, we will address some of the challenges that come with that and see what you can do also in your company, how you've been handling it, and what the future holds during the rest of the pandemic, but also probably how this might have changed some things permanently going forward. Let me introduce myself real quick. My name is Neil Schede. I'm the Director for Marketing and Communications here with the GACC Midwest, the German American Chamber of Commerce of the Midwest. We covered all the Midwestern states plus Colorado. It's been my pleasure to have been with the organization for now 4 years and working with a lot of interesting and exciting German companies entering the market, or even with the ones that have been here for decades and bringing them together in this network. I'm very happy to introduce our speakers and experts here today, and I'll just do that briefly and then leave it to them to introduce themselves and the companies they're with. I'm happy to have Markus Borkay, I hope I said that name right, on board here from Siemens, Frank Del Barto from Masuda Funai, and Joe Renz from Secova USA. And I think we will have some very different and interesting angles for the topic today and can cover the different challenges and also hopefully some solutions and takeaways for you on this topic. So let us dive right in, and I'll be happy to hand over to our first panelist for a brief introduction. Markus, the audience is yours. Thank you.
Neil, thank you very much. Thanks for having us, having me. And of course, good morning to everybody who's listening in today. My name is Markus Borkay. Niels, you were almost 100% correct with the pronunciation, but my name, of course, has been butchered so many times that I just go by Markus. So that's the easiest, of course. I don't think the Siemens needs much of an introduction as a company. I simply assert now that everybody knows Siemens, but I'm part of a division called Siemens Smart Infrastructure. The America's headquarters is in Chicago, Buffalo Grove area, but I'm actually calling in from Austin, Texas, which I will explain in a moment what actually got me to Austin. But smart infrastructure is about as the name probably indicates, about smart buildings and other smart infrastructure components. And those smart buildings also need smart services to keep them smart and make them even more smarter. So my introduction slide here basically just is just a quick takeaway that what we are pursuing certainly is to really change the game in terms of how buildings and infrastructure, critical infrastructure components are being maintained, and uptime, reliability, and availability is being guaranteed, and maximum benefit can be derived from these assets. If you can please go to the next slide. So the reason why I am in Austin, Texas, is because we have something called a digital service center, and I have, been given the opportunity to lead the efforts to build up this digital service center, which is located here in Austin. So you see a quick picture how the building looks like from the outside. I'm actually inside the building today. Not very often these days, but we'll talk about this, of course, a little bit later. But we established the Digital Service Center in 2017, so it's been up and running for 3.5 years. And we have about 200 professionals on the team here in Austin. And our focus is certainly digitalization and how do we drive, some of the things I just mentioned in terms of smart infrastructure, smart buildings. And you see a couple of indicators, and a couple of statistics here on the right side on the slide in terms of how many connections, how many buildings, how much remote service we provide, and of course, how much data we collect every day and week, and turn, those data into insights and action and outcomes. My final slide actually is a picture from the inside of our building. So just one wing of how it looks like. And I actually have taken this picture last week, not to just show you how friendly and inviting this environment is, but also to show that you don't see a lot of people here. So that's also, obviously, I wanted to tee up, obviously, the conversation that we're going to have here. Where's everybody? So if you knock, is everybody gone? No, somebody will certainly answer, but we're doing it a little bit different at this time. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Neil.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction and that recent picture. I think our office looks probably pretty similar. So Frank, floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. My name's Frank Del Barto with Masuda Funai, and I am the chair of the Employment Benefits and Practice Group. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk on this topic today. We've actually talked about it on obviously from an employment standpoint, working from home. And like many of you, we believe that's going to be a more of a norm going future. We have several clients who are going to have an almost entirely remote workforce, and then some who have decided that at least part of their workforce will remain remote continuously. So we'll talk about that. Next slide, please. So a little bit about our firm. Our firm was founded in 1929. We celebrated our 91st birthday in June remotely. So we had a remote party. We have 40 attorneys and 60 staff. Most of our headquarters is in downtown Chicago. I actually operate out of the Schaumburg office, and then we have an office in California. You can see on the right-hand side, kind of the practice areas that we're involved in. As I said, I'm in employment, labor, and benefits. We have corporate finance and acquisitions, doing a lot of buying and selling companies and that type of thing. Commercial competition and trade. That's a lot of contracting and sales stuff. Immigration practice group. Intellectual property. Obviously, we do litigation and commercial real estate. Next slide, please. These are the kind of the main areas. If you were to say, well, what do you do in kind of big key areas? Obviously, we work a lot with the corporate group and do mergers and acquisitions. We do employment litigation, employee benefits and compensation, trade secrets. Obviously, a big part of working at home right now. We talk a lot about that in our work from home webinar. About now that we have people working from home, and it's kind of what we'll talk about a lot today, is how do we protect that information that we have people working from home? How are they working from home? Is it a company computer, their own computer? and then what are our breach notification obligations. We'll talk a lot about that today. Obviously, union relations, whether you like the union or not, or don't have a union or don't want a union, how does that work? We do a lot of investigations. And then on the next slide, if you could, we certainly do a lot of training. So harassment prevention, business ethics, electronic communications. Obviously, many of our clients are international clients who are opening an office in the US for the first time. So we do a lot of employment-based training. You know, how are the employment rules different in the United States versus the country that you're coming from, whether it be Germany, Japan, Italy. So we have an international practice, and some of that just basic training of what it is to work and operate in the United States helps our clients out tremendously. And then obviously with the immigration comes the I-9 audits. My information's on the next slide. Again, we're happy to be here today to provide the legal perspective. Well, I'm just absolutely thrilled to be here, and it's a topic we've been working on. So it wasn't all that hard to put our information together today, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. I really appreciate it that you're able to join us this morning. That leaves us with Joe, so please.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for making time to listen to us today. My name is Jochen Renz, born and raised in Stuttgart, Germany, a product of the dual system that is so world famous in Germany. Did my apprenticeship with Eastman Kodak and experienced digital transformation disruption right there when the film went out the door. And even though Eastman invented the digital camera, it put them out of business. They now seem to have a new life, but that's a separate story. I worked at Mercedes during my vacation times, and then I came to the US for the first time with Bosch out in Broadview, finished my studies in Switzerland at CERN, and then did some studies in Australia as well. So getting a pretty global view on things. Started my IT career at CA Technologies, and back and forth between Chicago, returned in 2010. And since 2015, I've been with Secova USA, and we've been a GACC member ever since. So Kim, if I can have the next slide, please. At Secova, we provide a fully integrated EHS solution called SAM, Safety Always Matters. And we were going to talk about cybersecurity. We're talking about working from home. One of the key areas is to keep your employees engaged, but also to educate people on things that might not be as obvious to them when they work from home versus when they come to the office every day, as to how they log on and how they behave when they're online with the system. We have over 2.6 million users, over 1,000 customers, as you can see, and we are a generic approach to EHS. There's industry-specific solutions as well, but we really believe that it's a generic approach to how we solve this problem and how we operationalize an EHS strategy, including learning management with an organization. One of the key aspects of engaging your employees is that it's very easy to use. So in our case, if you can use an ATM machine, you can use our tool for management. It's as easy as dragging and dropping, and we are revision safe. So if Frank comes with a legal situation and we have to roll back to 5 years ago when Niels claims he hasn't had any PPE training, we can roll back to the very version of that training that Niels took, and he confirmed that he took it, understood it. Next slide, please, Kim. Our solution, which is GDPR compliant due to our German heritage, and we're hosting our cloud solution with AWS here in the United States. Again, I think things that we're going to touch on from a cybersecurity perspective is fully modular. So people can look at this and say, I'm only interested in visitor management at the moment, as I want to protect my supply chain from a cybersecurity perspective, as well as going into incident management, risk assessments, hazardous substances, inspection, survey management, which goes a little bit into behavior-based surveys, which again, working from home, cybersecurity can be an interesting component. And everything always gets pulled back into a cockpit dashboard that allows the management team and whoever you delegate it to give a unique view into your organization, the overall status of compliance, etc. And with that, I want to hand it back to Niels. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to all three of you for your introductions. I think that should have given already a good overview how we have different angles coming in here on tackling that topic, and also how this topic might be a lot more challenging than just thinking about, anyone can grab a laptop and work from home. But what does that actually mean? So with that, I actually want to start diving into our discussion round here, and maybe start out with something that affected all of us end of March, when really most of us went remote, that were able to go remote. What kind of challenges did you face in terms of your teams working with colleagues? Did you have the infrastructure in place? Did you have to create it? What was the situation in your company, and how did you manage that? And maybe we can just start with you, Marcus, and then go around.
Okay, well, that's a great question. So, we obviously over a couple of weeks, as the news, got worse and worse in February, March, we anticipated something was coming, and we thought we were well prepared. Just by the nature of my team, digital service center, we provide all our services, digital services, remotely to customers in any case, but we have done this, from a central location here in Austin. But we thought we were well prepared because we obviously have cloud solutions, analytics systems, etc., AWS hosted systems that should be easily accessible from anywhere. However, the devil is in the detail. And some of the services that we provide, we call them life safety dependent because of critical monitoring infrastructure. And for those, we actually have our own internal network. All the kudos to AWS and their availability, but when it comes to life safety, we don't have the luxury to just submit a ticket and hope somebody will eventually get to it, at some time. So we need to take immediate action. So we have a combination between cloud systems as well as internal critical infrastructure. And so our first step was, of course, let's come up with a phased approach. Let's go remote where we can immediately to also mitigate the risk for everybody else in the building. So reducing the occupancy for those colleagues that got to be in the building because of the network security that I just mentioned. So that was the very first step. We took immediate action, and that was a relatively easy transition. Of course, there's more behind it. I'm sure we'll dive into this. And then we created a plan how we immediately will be able to extend this critical network that I just mentioned for life safety reasons outside of this building, essentially make it accessible from home, but not obviously wanting to take any chances with introducing any vulnerabilities, any additional risk factors in terms of cyber threats, etc., etc. So that took us a couple of weeks, and during this time, obviously, we had plans to rotate people in and out. We have a 24/7 operation for some of our services, so we have always people in the building, spreading them out, and taking obviously all the prudent measures that everybody else, I'm sure is all familiar with social distancing, hand sanitizing, masks, etc., etc. So ultimately, for us, we almost coined the term C equals C, because COVID is a little bit like the daily tasks and daily challenges that we have in our business by itself, and cyber is one of them, to protect, obviously the integrity of the services that we provide. And I'm saying that COVID is a little bit like this because all it needs is one incident that can spread so quickly. So on COVID side, obviously you have one incident, you bring it into your office, and it can get very quickly out of control, and so can cyber, obviously. You have one penetration somewhere, and it can get very quickly out of control. So for us, again, it was extremely important, whatever we could do possibly, is to mitigate not just the risk, but to prevent it to ever being able to enter into our business environment. So,
yeah, thank you for that insight, Marcus. How did you, Frank and Joe, how did you manage that switch that we all experienced?
Well, we were fortunate in that from the attorney standpoint, most of us have laptops and are used to working remotely. So there was no issue from an attorney standpoint in going from an office environment to a remote environment. Our challenge, though, was some of the staff. We don't necessarily have staff set up to work from home, so we had to quickly deploy the excess laptops to our staff and get them set up to work from home, because we were able to seamlessly move to home because we do that anyway, and we're able to do that, but we don't have staff. Now our staff basically is entirely remote as well with firm computers. And so getting them set up, there was obviously a little bit of delay in that, and checking what their environment was at home and what systems they had at home, and here, take our laptop. And then all the just day to day, I can't get it to work. It's your internet. No, it's your system. It's all the typical things you go through when you're trying to set somebody up working remotely. But we did it, and so we have done it successfully. One of the reasons we've been successful at doing that, and we're also looking about people working remotely in the future, is we knew each other prior to that, and so working from home and calling people up that you've met before wasn't a challenge for us, and saying, hey, I need your help with this, or I need help with this. Now our challenge will be, how do we effectively bring people back at the right time? And what are the right number of people to bring back? Do we need all the people back? So we'll go through the same challenges that every business will go through in terms of, what is the right number of remote workforce? We won't be ever totally remote, because for our culture, we're a small company. We have to work together. But for larger companies and some of our clients, they've determined that, they're heavily based in technology anyway, so they can do it very effectively. But I think we did it very successfully. A lot of that success comes from the fact that we knew each other before we all went home.
Yeah, and for us, I always look at things as people, process, and technology. And I think, the first thing, to Frank's point, everyone has a laptop so they can take it home. The first technology challenge is not all internets are created equal. So then you find out someone has a slower connectivity, some other issue on the network. I was on a demo, my little kids were on a Netflix movie, so it slowed me down. I have to ask the kids to get off Netflix, so my demo runs a little bit faster. Those are the kind of little things. From the people side, we saw a significant reduction in productivity. And this is, again, depending on your personal situation, but when you have kids and the kids don't go to school, homeschooling, etc., it just changes that dynamic quite a bit in terms of how much time you can devote to work. And then the hours don't line up all the time the same way as it used to be in the old days, when from 9 to 5, when you drop the kids off and you pick them up at night. From a process perspective, we were always good because there's no paper being pushed back and forth at Secova for a long time. And we had the infrastructure in place. We upgraded certain things, like our VPN went to a two-factor authentication, things like that. Because again, from a cybersecurity perspective, the vulnerability is not, the biggest concern is not necessarily the work laptop dialing into a system, but the home network is equipped with Nest, with all the other gimmicks that we all have to control our lives. And a lot of them are very, very hackable. And a lot of them there's not a big secret to get very easily into that device. And once you're in the device, you're in the network, that's when a lot of bad things happen. Because even if you look at some of the cybersecurity challenges we have, even the Twitter hack was an inside job, So it's not necessarily some bad person somewhere on the other part in the world that is causing you harm, but it's really unbeknownst to you and which device is connected to what, right? I mean, we've created this mumbo jumbo of IT at home that is creating vulnerabilities for us. So from a people, process, and technology perspective, that was our experience so far.
Yeah, thank you for those insights. I think before I pick on each of you a little bit more individually on your specific backgrounds that you bring to the discussion, one thing that I would be curious about, we have with Siemens and secova, we do have that very strong European or even German background. So something like GDPR and very specific guidelines or legal requirements of how to host data, where to store data, client data, are very strict. And I think that, Joe, I think you mentioned that in the beginning, that you have that background, so you already apply it. And I would think, Frank, with all the international clients you guys work with, that's something that you're very familiar with. But now with going remotely, it's not just about us and the workforce that goes remotely, but you also have to manage your clients' data suddenly out of your house network. You know, maybe that server is still somewhere else. Maybe you have to switch where you store it. So how did you manage that? Did anything change with the current situation in that regard?
If I may go first, you know, there's always, of course, you know, human components to it. But the more we can deploy technology or make it easier to you know, kind of do the right thing using technology and automated processes, it certainly helps. So, for instance, when it comes to data and documents, document classification is really important to us, right? To understand what's the content and how do we share, you know, this type of information, and how and where do we store this type of information. So from unrestricted to restricted to confidential and strictly confidential documents. And we basically introduced some technology that forces essentially that decision-making process every single time a new document is being created to automatically give it the right marking. You know, again, we can simply rely on human doing the right things, you know, our colleagues, which you know, I strongly believe that in most cases they will, but something always slips through. So having some, you know, technology that augments this, you know, that enforces the question, is this really a document that needs to be protected, certainly helps the situation. And from there on, automatically, for instance, if a document needs to be shared just via email, we automatically encrypt these emails just based on what attachments are going into that certain transmission. So technology can help, but there is certainly always going to be the human factor in it, and that has, you know, can only be mitigated obviously with training, with open discussions, and you know, not pointing fingers, but you know, we're all making mistakes, and you know, learning and understanding what works, what doesn't work, and what's also cumbersome, right? Because sometimes people sidestep, you know, necessary and important procedures because simply they're cumbersome. I mean, we all, I guess, in our own personal life, we are happy to provide a lot of data to, you know, to all our, you know, Facebook and Googles and Amazons, and then at the same time, we hate the, you know, sometimes the restrictiveness that we have in our business world. So it's really finding the right compromise in between, but drawing some lines again that makes it important that awareness is there, and you know, always looking for more process improvements of technology that can, you know, can help us to take some of these decision making out of the process.
I agree with everything Marcus said, and I think when we start looking at our systems, we have to understand what kind of a honeypot of data we create, because there's certain data that is obviously much more interesting to bad people that want to do you harm, your company harm, than other data. And the smaller your honeypot is, the less attractive it most likely is, right? And if you look, for example, we all jumped to Zoom, and then Zoom was accused of prescribing what was discussed in the conversation. You should have a Zoom conversation like you have a conversation at a Starbucks when someone might sit next to the competition, or someone who's not has good intentions, right? And in our case, we work a lot with mid-sized companies. If you want to have the data on your own premise, on your own network, we can certainly support that. But we also, as I mentioned, do software as a service. And there we rely on the big partners, the AWSs, the T-Systems in Germany, who have obviously a significant amount of resources in order to protect their networks. And particularly if you're a mid-sized company whose expertise and specialty is not cybersecurity, we kind of outsource that, for the lack of a better term. But I think it all starts and falls with what kind of data you put into the system. And in our case, our footprint is extremely small. You know, between your first name, your last name, and your logon ID, the system will run. if you then add your email address for workflow notifications to force some of that process that Marcus mentioned, and to make it a little bit more sticky than just recommended, okay, now you have 4 data points. But a lot of those things are in the public domain anyway. If you go on LinkedIn, you see the name, the first name, the email, right? So these are not honeypots, in my opinion. And then you can expand it back to Marcus's point, the human factor. But the system, the way we designed it, is run with a very small footprint of master data that, as a consequence, is not as attractive to someone like a Twitter account or a big Siemens HR database or something like that.
Yeah. And if I may just add one other point, data, we always think in bits and bytes and documents, but even having a business conversation from home, like using one's phone, who else is listening, right? So we actually advise all our employees to be on the lookout and be smart about what else might be in the room, like an Alexa or like some other, voice-activated devices that can potentially listen in, And so, again, it's the vigilant part that is so important. And of course, we can't control it 100%. Right? We can only remind and educate and create awareness with our employees, for some of these things.
Yeah, maybe Frank, we heard quite a bit now about the specific challenges that might be at home that we're not aware of right away from the Nests and Alexas. But let's assume a breach does occur, or I notice, my old Alexa version wasn't updated, it has been hacked, or whatever other appliance I have. Maybe my kids, created a breach. What are the obligations then that the employees have in terms of reporting that, and what would your recommendations also be going forward?
Yeah, so certainly our certainly our employees would have an obligation to report the breach to us. We may know about it first. The biggest legal challenge that we have with a breach is there's no universal set of laws in the United States that says, okay, this is what you do. You're operating both under a federal standard and a state standard, and those breach notification laws could be based on the number of people involved, the type of information that was breached, how fast do you have to notify somebody. So unfortunately, from the legal perspective, a lot of it, when we're looking at a company, would have to be, the kind of the preliminary due diligence of what information do we have? Whose information are we holding? What information are we holding? And then at least we could say, okay, if there was a breach, these are the laws that may be implicated, whether it's a federal law that the FTC Act may cover, whether it's HIPAA violation, whether it's a financial violation, or simply a consumer violation. For example, we're storing credit card information, we're storing names of people. We have a lot of clients who may not even realize that they have a breach notification requirement because they're in the machine tool business. But you took a credit card for that machine and you got somebody's information for that machine. So you may have a breach notification requirement. So a lot of it has to do with recognizing the type of information that you're storing at first point, and then once we know where that breach occurs, then you have to go and say, okay, most of the time we have a strike team or awareness team put together with HR and IT and legal, and what's our response to this breach? Hopefully we have that plan put in place before the breach occurs, so we're just implementing it. Every breach is different. Every breach has its own nuances, where the bad actors happen to be. How do you get in contact with them? What did they do? Did they lock up the entire system? But at least if you've done that kind of due diligence planning up front, you're now implementing the plan and then figuring out, okay, we store this information, we have this information, we at least know the laws that may apply to us, versus the breach occurring, and then you're saying, boy, I'm not sure really what applies to us here.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really helpful. Also, how individual it is. I think considering that we all work remotely, the individual states, I think, are significant too. I can speak for myself, working from Michigan. We have colleagues in Colorado. Sometimes we have colleagues working from Germany. So I think that creates challenges that we didn't necessarily think about right away. When we're at the moment taking the laptop physically, I can work somewhere else, but what other implication does that have in the long run, especially for people? Joe, I wanted to ask you, I think initially you mentioned the EHS solution about keeping customers' data safe. And I would be interested in hearing a little bit more about that, probably also to preventing situations like the one we just discussed.
Yeah, I think first of all, it's to create the awareness on something, right? I go back to healthy eating many moons ago. Obviously, with my white hair, I'm an old guy. So there was a time where no one read the label on food. And then all of a sudden people learned, hey, if I eat a lot of this and less of this, I can live healthier and the world has become a better place. We're now going through the same thing, to Marcus's point on data, that we are getting more aware of the fact that we're sharing our data with Facebook and Amazon and others. But to Frank's point, I mean, who really knows that there is a regulation at a federal level and that Colorado is different to Illinois? You never had to worry about this because you badge in, you go to work, you sit at your desk, and there's someone else usually who's in charge of this. And now that we are put much more burden on us individually, we almost have to have a new risk assessment of some sort and see what is my exposure, right? And to educate people in the first place on the do's and don'ts. And then once those do's and don'ts have been communicated, Marcus again says, you know, people usually take the shortest possible route. We want to share situations that have occurred that are bad. So best practices, good or bad. You know, Joe has been hacked, and this is what has happened, right? His identity has been stolen, or we have been held hostage, to Frank's point, something like this. And then it's constant reminders. I mean, every time you log on to your VPN, it's not the same. But if you have, for example, single sign-on, that's an easier way, right? So there's technology available that you log on once, and then once you logged on, you have access to all the systems based on your privacy settings and security settings. How much data is being downloaded on your laptop every single time you open one of the applications, right? And then what happens if the connection is lost? Is the data updated? Is it not updated? Those are the kinds of things where I think, in our case with a learning management solution, we send out these reminders. And you know, we're talking about COVID, washing hands. I mean, that's what you teach. I teach my 4- and 2-year-old, right? Why do I have to remind adults how to wash hands? Because we learned this is one of the big factors of preventing COVID. So we have a training for hand washing, for proper face mask wearing, and you can push that out every month and say it's a recurring training. You might think it's painful, but just to remember, Niels, you know, this is how you log on. This is how you store your data. And God forbid something happens, please call us immediately.
Yeah, I'd like to add something, and I'm sure it's not unique to the business I'm involved in, but for us, you know, because of the infrastructure that we support, think about hospitals right now, right? So we're not talking about buildings that are necessarily empty. In many cases, we're talking about buildings that are the exact opposite, right? We need to do everything in our power from our side, from Siemens' side, to enable our customers, like a critical hospital, for instance, to stay in business, so to speak. And so the old adage is, you know, hope for the best but plan for the worst, is really important to us. So a disaster recovery plan, that's what I'm getting to, is something that is a must for us. So we certainly don't plan for being attacked or having any disaster happening to our infrastructure, to the telemetry that we have with our customers. But if in case something would happen, we do have plans that we also at times exercise just to be ready because of the critical nature of what we do, essentially. So disaster recovery plan might look different depending on what business you are in, but to have one, you know, even if it's just written down on one piece of paper, I think is a valuable exercise for anybody, regardless of what business you're in.
And to tag on to this before Frank jumps in, the internal employee, again, Twitter is the latest of the examples, the Target hack, other things. Tesla has just gone through a big discussion over trade secrets and things like this. If I'm sitting in my cubicle and I put my memory stick in to take data away that is not unauthorized, and I have to look over my shoulder, is Frank coming or not? It's very different than if I sit in my living room at 12 o'clock at night, have full access to my network, and now I can download megabyte after megabyte of information. So don't think of cybersecurity and as this outsider who wants to do us bad. It can also be a disgruntled employee. It can be someone who, for whatever reason, has decided to part ways and just heads up on information before he or she goes to the next employer.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of the cybersecurity theft or issues are actually internal issues, right? The employee takes the information with him or her, and just about everybody's done it. They've taken their work email and they have a document they're working on, and they're saying, I don't want to log into the system. I'm just going to email this to myself, do it on my desktop at home, and then I'll email it back. And that everybody's done it. I mean, so that's a training issue that, if I log onto the system, I got to put my code in. It's going to take me time. It's slow. Let me just save this document on my desktop, and then I'll keep transferring it back and forth. And we lose information that way as well.
And the trade secret piece here is if you send it to Gmail, you agreed with Gmail that in their T's and C's that they you allow them to read your emails. This is how it happens when I send Niels an email asking, can I borrow $100? I get all these short-term credit note emails because they do read the emails. They also spell check you and do other things. So now this secret thing that I'm writing on my Gmail before I send it back to my work email is now rightfully in Google's hands, and they're running their AI algorithms over this thing like there's no tomorrow. And so is that a cybersecurity breach? That would obviously be a question for Frank. Where do you draw the line here, right? The idea is do not send it to a non-work email, but as Frank says, we've all done it.
Yeah, I think that points to a very specific challenge, one that we might not even be really aware of. What workarounds have been used to even enable all of us to work remotely? It's not like we had the perfect setup end of March and all went remotely. We had to, probably figure some things out before it worked really smoothly, and it's still a process. So during that process, I guess we're a little bit in uncharted territory, but that's going forward. The question is going to be, I think one will be training employees. Everyone who's on your teams now, had a couple of months to get used to it, but there will be new colleagues. So how do we onboard them correctly in this new situation? And how do we go about that? And that also from a perspective, maybe that new employee will start working from home on the first day. So what do they need to know that might be different than if you greet them in the cubicle, lead them around, and give them the checklist for the first day? And maybe Marcus, maybe you have an idea for that. We saw that empty office earlier. So at some point you will have those new colleagues.
Yeah, in fact, we are never missed a beat in that regard. Because of again the nature of what we're involved in. We saw nothing but an upswing, right? The demand actually skyrocketed for our types of services. It was certainly on the upswing before because a lot more and more companies wanting to realize the benefit of digitalizing their infrastructure. But since COVID, we actually have seen, like another step function, if you will. And so we were in the need to actually add some new colleagues, through March, to April, and since then. And certainly our processes and our onboarding, how we call this, for bringing in new employees, wasn't based on somebody working remotely from day one, right? It was based on getting them into the environment, having colleagues around, having a training class, having several steps that allow somebody to become productive quickly. And so we had to rethink this relatively quickly. And which brings me to the point of communication, right? There's the business-related communication, right, that we all have amongst the team, but then there's also the social aspect and the team building, right? For everybody who was on board and was part of the team, then distributing amongst wherever they live and working remotely, there still was the belonging was there, right? There was still the team factor. But if you bring somebody new in, how do you create that rapport, right? And so communication, of course, is extremely important. And I think it was mentioned by somebody earlier that you had, I think you actually said it, you had like a virtual event. So we we've put a lot of emphasis of having these kind of virtual events, you know, Friday afternoon, just raising the glass, if you will, virtually. So no drunk driving involved, for sure. And so, yeah, it's just a collection of different things that we had to step by step having to you know, to transfer, to change ultimately, to get, you know, to a situation now where we can be as effective, you know, with the onboarding of a new employee like we have been before, but in this new normal, if you will.
Yeah, thank you for that insight. I would like to touch on one more topic before we open it up to some Q&A questions from the audience, and that is the vendors that we all work with, and that all use, I would say, different programs and store information, mostly from our employees and colleagues. And I think, Frank, maybe I'll pitch that one to you first. You recently hosted a webinar on cyber breach in a 401k provider. And I guess my question would be, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that individual case, but how do we go about as an employer and for our audience, how do we vet external service providers, be that for 401k, you know, be that an ADP service that we use to manage our workforce? How do we vet them and make sure that from a cyber perspective, that they will, you know, have the right things in place to protect that data?
Okay. From the legal perspective, we would do it, you know, similar like any vendor search. You would contact the vendor, whether it's a consultant, advisor, whatever you're using, and it's not a common sense approach, but it kind of is, right? What am I concerned about? And then approaching that vendor with a questionnaire or an RFP and saying, okay, tell me about your cybersecurity. Do you have a chief information officer? Do you have a security officer? Have you ever had a breach before? So you're almost going down a questionnaire. You know, what are our interfaces going to be? What are the vulnerabilities? Do you ever test your system? Has it ever been penetrated? So we want to know that up front before we get into this relationship. When we're getting into the relationship from the contracting perspective, we want to make sure that we're using standard terms and conditions in contracting, right? So if there is a breach, is there an indemnity provision? Is there insurance? Is it even mentioned in the agreement? You know, so we're entering this agreement, we're going to exchange data. What if there is a breach? So we want to make sure from the legal perspective that we've analyzed who's responsible for that breach, who's indemnified, who's insured by it. So from that standpoint on, and then when we terminate the relationship, again, whether it's good termination or bad termination, what happens to that data now? Do they destroy that data? Do they give it back to us? So we have an obligation going in during the relationship and at the end of the relationship from a legal standpoint on what happens to that data. In the 401k webinar that we did, that was really, there were actually remote cases where employees were working from home, accessing their 401k account, and then the bad actors got into the employee's personal email account and then used a distribution form and essentially emptied a 401k account. And that happened both from, it was two instances. One where these bad actors had the employee's social security number and date of birth, and they were able to get into the vendor that way and take $245,000. And the other one where the employee was working from home, she was the administrator, she was sending in a distribution form on behalf of it was actually a law firm, the firm's partner. That distribution went fine, but then her email was breached, and then that same distribution form kept coming in until there was no more money left. So that unfortunately, that case is still going on. That individual, both cases are still going on. One is a case here in Chicago, that's $245,000. And then the other case, the law firm case, is out of Pennsylvania, where the partner in the law firm is out $400,000 because the remote access was breached and his account was emptied.
Yeah, I think thank you for those examples. I think that shows the severity that can actually happen, puts numbers on it, you know, that is real. And I think we're in a situation where those vulnerabilities are increased more for people working out of a different environment from home or other remote locations. I would like to open it up to our audience to ask some questions that we can discuss here for the next 15 minutes or so. Please use the chat function on the right to submit any questions, and we will go from there. And I think I have a first one already in here that's been lingering here already for the last 5 minutes, and that is probably to the three of you actually. What do you suppose is the new normal even after COVID is done? Where are we going from here? Obviously, this is an extraordinary situation, but the question is, what will be the new normal in 2021 going forward in terms of the remote workforce?
So if I may go first, I think we have a pretty good idea. You know, from the top down within Siemens, you know, on a global scale, actually there was some statements early on that were made that said, you know, this is obviously a situation that nobody was asking for, but it's also an opportunity to change, you know, some old-fashioned ways of thinking. You know, can people be productive or as productive working from home as they are in the office? You know, and you can imagine there's a lot of old way of thinking even from mid-level management and even from senior management that says, well, if I can't see them, they for sure can't work, right? Well, I think we have proven that this is not necessarily the case, and I can certainly only speak for the team that I'm responsible for, and we have actually seen the opposite. We have seen an increase in productivity, an increased engagement, and you know, a lot of positive results coming out of it. You know, with employee satisfaction, etc., etc. So, long story short, Siemens actually announced already back in April that as a company globally we'll go to a hybrid model. So, working from home will become part of the new normal for everybody who can work from home. So obviously there will be some limitations, but for everybody who can work from home, will be able to do so 2 or 3 days a week, and the other 2 days, you know, in an office environment. And that office is not really an office anymore, but it's more of a place of collaboration, a meeting place, you know, for team building, for again collaboration, for you know getting together and solving problems together, and then you know going back into maybe one's own personal environment at home where people feel most comfortable. So that's kind of the new normal for us. We are not quite there yet because we are mostly still remote, particularly here in Texas. You know, we have seen unfortunately too much of an upswing in cases, but that will pass. We all know it will pass eventually. But we ain't going to go back to the old way of working. So the new normal is pretty clear for us.
Joe, do you want to put in?
Sure. So this is my personal opinion. I'm not going to represent the secova opinion on this necessarily, but I think we're going to see one thing, the gig economy, which was something that was the big rave. I think we're going to find out now that the people who enjoyed the benefits of the gig economy are now also seeing the disadvantage of that if there's no corporate structure behind that might be able to pay you, even though there's less income or less profit or less top line, and to keep people engaged and employed and paid. Even if we heard this in the previous panel, if Kurzarbeit, if they shorten your work week, but at least you get a paycheck, a steady paycheck, and benefits, all these kinds of things. And then I also think, not to disagree with Marcus, because I think every company will do this slightly differently, but in general, I think that the humans are social animals. They want to be around others. Yes, they love their family, but they also want to be around the colleagues and have that social interaction. It might go to the couple of days a week, to Marcus's point, which might help us with the environment and with mobility, with you know, rush hour wise, everyone in the office at 9 and goes home at 5. Maybe we can stretch all those things out. But if Facebook made a big commitment in New York on office space during the crisis, and not that I'm a big fan of Facebook, but they're a big player clearly, and they can afford it. So I think sooner or later, when the new normal becomes closer to the old normal, I think people ultimately would want to go back to work just for the social the social component to it, which I think is important, particularly for me as a German coming to America. You know, the water cooler talk was completely underrated in Germany, at least when I was in Germany. It's a very important piece of social life and company DNA.
Yeah, I can't speak for the firm either completely, but I think we'll have a greater tolerance for working at home. We'll allow it more often, but I don't think we'll ever go fully working from home, because there's some value to being able to go next door and sitting down in somebody's office and saying, hey, what would you do about this? And then for the new people coming in too, again, one of the reasons we feel we were successful working from home is we all know each other. If we didn't know each other, it would be a much different environment if I'm just calling somebody out of the blue in California and saying, hey, I'm Frank from Chicago. You've never met me before, but let's talk about this problem. But from a client perspective, I think we're seeing more clients saying they're going to go to a hybrid model. We have a couple of clients who already decided that some positions will never come back to the office. They'll be at home. So they'll be looking to reduce their real estate footprint. And when people are hired into those positions, they will work from home. So working from home is going to be something that we'll see in the future. What we've been working with our clients on is if you're going to allow people to work from home, either temporarily or permanently, make sure that arrangement is formalized, that you do have an agreement in place, that these are the terms, that I'm not working 8 to 5 and you're working 11 to 6, so we can collaborate during normal working hours. And then just like obviously, this is cybersecurity, but if you're going to work from home, I need to know how you're working from home. Is there a dedicated workspace? Are you doing it on your kitchen table? Who's at home? Are your parents at home? Are you taking care of elderly people? Are your children at home? Are they back in school? So I want to know that if I'm going to allow you to work from home, you've got a reasonable opportunity that you're going to put in a reasonable day's work for me. I understand you may throw in the laundry once in a while, or the washing machine guy may come, but are you going to give me on a daily basis, are you going to give me a good effort? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And I think, Joe, you might have mentioned that it's going to be slightly different for each company and probably also industry, depending if you can actually work remotely. I mean, we've seen and heard enough in the news, I think, about certain industries where it's just not possible or feasible. And those will be still having to go in and face those challenges. I have one more question here from the audience. You mentioned Zoom bombing earlier. Are there any specific programs or providers that you recommend for remote work? I can start from our end. I think we've tried by now probably all of them during the first couple of months. We've tried Zoom in the beginning too. I think at some point it was recommended not to use anymore. Then switch to Teams, which is quite good for internal collaboration, I think, quality-wise also as well. And as we are here today, we're using a GoToWebinar, but we also use the GoToMeeting sister program for external calls. So I think it was for us a little bit of trial and error from the chamber perspective, because obviously I mentioned it earlier too, we have people in different states and also communicate a lot with Germany. So that was really important for us even before the crisis hit, but now even more so. So yeah, it's Microsoft Teams working for us. That's not an endorsement, but that's what's been working for us. And we're using the GoTo platform for virtual events and meetings.
Teams is also very popular for us internally, to a point that I think most people use it these days. But sometimes we don't have the choice. Like when we communicate with the customer, then they, have their own preference, and so we have to be flexible somewhat to use that. But we try definitely to stay away from Zoom. In fact, we don't allow it to be on our phones and our computers per our internal IT policy. So that's definitely not recommended, at least within Siemens.
Yeah, we're using Zoom, and we were using Slack, but we used Slack before that. I don't think there's one that's better than the other per se. I think tendency-wise, again, we're the German Chamber of Commerce, maybe a publicly traded company might be a little bit more sensitive to security breaches than a privately held one, just because usually the Zoom was a young company, not as mature yet in their processes. Microsoft has been doing government contracts for many, many years, so you should suggest that it's maybe a little bit safer. But I think at the end of the day, one, be careful what you say. Just again, going back to my Starbucks coffee conversation, assume that someone's listening in. And then also never forget the third parties. And I'm not going to go down the TikTok route here, but there's other applications that might sit on your phone or on your machine or whatever it is that listen in. Grammarly is an interesting example. They just listen in to help you, but you never know what they do with your data. Going a little bit back to be careful what you're communicating in the first place, because it might be a third party that is not even on your radar that might be causing you more harm than the vendor that you're choosing.
And how about you, Frank?
We're the same. We're using mostly Microsoft Teams, but if the client sets up a Zoom call, then we'll go ahead and do the Zoom call, and we're using GoToWebinar too. But again, we would probably start with Teams, the Teams call first, and if the client insists on a Zoom call, then we would do the Zoom call.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We have one more question here, I think, right now in the chat. Let's get to that. So what trend do you see for hiring remotely? Will people need to be in the same city as your office?
You go first. For us, it doesn't matter where you sit. Goes back to Frank's point. We have to have a common denominator in time zones and when we work together, if we need to collaborate. But I don't think it matters anymore where you sit. The internet connectivity is a challenge. I speak from experience. Sometimes when I'm, visiting somewhere and it's a slower connection, that's not necessarily good and inhibits your productivity. But as long as your productivity technically is ensured, I don't think we will ever care about where you work.
I would say it depends. I mean, there's certainly way more flexibility now than it was, just 6 months ago. But it does depend somewhat. I mentioned the hybrid model that we are looking at, with certain days in the office for collaboration, because we don't want to miss out on that factor, because we see this as the team can do so much more than the sum of the individuals, and so we definitely want to take advantage of this, and being in the same city certainly allows that. So ultimately, but it depends.
Yeah, and for our firm, we're probably not. We're just getting to it's okay for people to work at home. So we've gone from a culture where everybody needed to be in the office to the pandemic saying, oh no, people can be effective working from home. The entire office, actually. I don't know that we'll get to recruiting people internationally yet. That's probably in different states until we can get more comfortable with people working from home.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I think it also shows how this crisis accelerates some of these trends overall. So even away and from just the cybersecurity aspect, it's really accelerating what we can do remotely overall. I don't have any additional questions here in the chat right now. What I would like to do is point out that just as in the fireside chat, we do have the handout in the right-hand side in the box. So if you would like to join any of the later panels or roundtables, you can go right through that PDF that we linked there and click the link and dial in at the starting time. And I hope you find other topics interesting as well. With that, I would also like to say a big thank you to Frank, Joe, and Marcus here for taking your time to speaking with us from all the different locations. I'm very glad how this worked out, and I thank you for your insights.
Thank you for having me. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.